President Vladimir Putin said Tuesday that Russia was suspending participation in New START, its last nuclear arms limitation treaty with the United States. The announcement, made ahead of the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, follows months of veiled threats by the Russian leader that have stirred fears of nuclear war in Europe. In a speech where he blamed Kyiv's Western allies for Russia's invasion, Putin also accused the United States of testing new advanced nuclear weapons and NATO of openly seeking to attack Russia's nuclear facilities. In this context, I have to say today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Strategic Arms Treaty, Putin said at his first State of the Nation address since invading Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Before we get back to discussing the treaty, we need to understand how we'll take into account the strategic arsenals, that is the combined strike capacities, of such NATO countries as France and the UK. New START, which Moscow and Washington signed in 2010 and have since extended to 2026, caps the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads held by the world's two largest nuclear powers at 1,550 each. Russia suspended U.S. on-site inspections under New START in August 2022 at the height of its special military operation in Ukraine. It had placed its strategic forces on high alert shortly after invading Ukraine. Putin on Tuesday ordered the Defense Ministry and the state nuclear agency Rosatom to stand by for nuclear weapons tests. We won't be the first to conduct them. But if the U.S. does, then so will we, the Russian leader warned hours before U.S. President Joe Biden was scheduled to give a speech marking the anniversary of Russia's war in Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the decision to suspend New START participation was deeply unfortunate and irresponsible, but stressed the U.S. remained willing to talk about the issue. We remain ready to talk about strategic arms limitations at any time with Russia, irrespective of anything else going on in the world or in our relationship, Blinken said. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg also criticized Putin's move, saying the whole arms control architecture has been dismantled in Europe. Alexander Gabuev, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, called Putin's statement a futile attempt to intimidate the U.S. The Kremlin decided in vain to scare the Americans by suspending New START. They will not back down, and their military-industrial complex is able to play the arms race much better than the Russian one, Gabuev wrote. Russia remains committed to its last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the United States despite claims that it is failing to comply with the treaty, Moscow's ambassador to Washington said Wednesday as fears of nuclear confrontation loom over the war in Ukraine. The U.S. State Department on Tuesday accused Russia of not complying with New START by suspending inspections and canceling talks. It did not accuse its Cold War rival of expanding the number of nuclear warheads beyond agreed limits. Responding to the accusations, Ambassador Anatoly Antonov instead blamed Washington for the deterioration of New START, claiming Moscow was responding to the hybrid war unleashed by the West against our country. We have warned that arms control cannot be isolated from geopolitical realities, the Russian diplomat said in comments published on the Russian embassy's Facebook page. At the same time, Antonov said we intend to continue observing the central limits of the treaty. Later Wednesday, the Kremlin said it believes that the continuation of this treaty is very important. On the other hand, we see that the United States has actually destroyed the legal framework in the field of arms control and security, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters. New START, the only remaining arms reduction treaty between the world's two largest nuclear powers, establishes a limit on both countries' strategic nuclear arsenals. It will remain in force until 2026, at which point it will be up for another extension. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said last week that talks on New START had been effectively frozen even before Moscow sent its forces into Ukraine. He blamed Washington's refusal in late 2021 to accept Russia's demands for security guarantees, which included clauses to halt military cooperation with former Soviet countries and permanently block Ukraine from NATO membership. We can say that as a result of Washington's actions, arms control has become a hostage to the overall deep degradation of our bilateral relations, Ryabkov told the Kommersant Business Daily. Diplomacy between the two powers has ground to a bare minimum over the past year as the U.S. leads a drive to punish Russia economically for its war against Ukraine and arm Kyiv with billions of dollars in weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin has issued thinly veiled threats to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, reviving Cold War-era fears of an apocalyptic war. Russia indefinitely postponed talks under New START that had been due to start on November 29 in Cairo, accusing the United States of toxicity and animosity.